Welcome back. Right, okay. We want to make this image color. So how do we do that? If you look on the image panel here on the tab, this is a Pexels image, so thank you very much to the photographer who shared it out there. I made it black and white deliberately to show this to you. So it says here grey. You'll get others that are monochrome, and this is saying it's an 8-bit image. So to change this back so we can paint colour on it, let's say image mode, and there it says grayscale, and it tells you it's an 8-bit channel. We want it in RGB colour. So let's click RGB and say merge. It's merged both the layers because I had a copy underneath. So I'm just now going to duplicate that one again, Command or Control J, and store it underneath. So now we have an image. If you can see, it now says RGB. So it's now actually possible to save this as a color image. We could have painted adjustment layers over the top and we'd have seen them, but we wouldn't have been able to save it as RGB because it was a black and white image. So that's how you change that. So image mode, change from grayscale, RGB, and this is your channels here. Let's not worry about that today. Okay, so we're going to create a new layer, and the first thing I'm going to show you how to do is actually paint colour. This is an incredibly powerful way of putting back colour when colour's actually missing. So here down on the panel, we have our option to create a new transparent layer above because we're not going to paint directly on the image. There's my transparent layer above. Now, there are multiple reasons why you wouldn't want to destroy your image. And when you start working like this, you'll realize the power of layers. So let's grab a brush and let's grab some color. So I've selected my brush tool by clicking on the icon, or you can hit B on your keypad for the brush tool. Here are your color swatches. Now we usually use black and white because we've been painting on our masks. In this case, let's use some colour. So I'm going to click on the little box. It doesn't matter which one. Oh, this is going to be my foreground colour, it's going to say. So now we have a colour picker appeared. Let's come over here to the option panel that appears and let's pick some colour. I am going to grab, oh, I kind of like that mauvey bluey colour. So let's grab that one for now. So come over here. Now, before we go any further, I just want to show you something about the brush tool I mentioned in an earlier lesson. So I'm going to make my brush a bit bigger by using the square brackets on my keyboard. We've grabbed the brush tool, so we have our brush options appeared again at the top here. So with the brush setting to 100% hardness, I'm going to hit return. And I'm going to paint, we're on a transparent layer, so we're not painting on our subject layer, we're painting on this transparent layer. It's just a blank, empty sheet of nothing. Got purple selected, so let's just paint with a hard brush. There you go, you've got a lovely hard edge. Now see what happens if I drop that down to 100% softness. We have a much softer edge. I'm going to zoom in a bit so you can see better what the effect is. So if you want to do detailed work around the edge of something, you want to adjust your brush hardness so you get a nice solid edge. If you don't, it's a lovely soft finish if you want to blend, but if you want to actually have a sharp edge, for example, on the edge of this dress, and you use a 100% soft brush, the paint is going to bleed over the edge. So that is why brush hardness and softness makes so much difference. So let's just delete this layer and add a new blank layer. I've just clicked here on my plus icon and we're going to come in and we're going to paint on this dress. So I'm just going to zoom out a tiny bit. So I am going to bring my brush hardness up a little bit, but not 100% at the moment. And what I like to do is drop my flow down. The reason I like to work with flow is because if I just go backwards and forwards, it will add more paint. So you end up with the effect you want. So less flow, let's just pull that right down. You can see through, as you can see there, particularly with the dress, the background of the dress there. Whereas if I bring that right up to 100 and go over it, you won't be able to see through. Oh, you can a little bit. Actually, that's quite a strong effect. And we've got our opacity pulled down as well. So adjusting your opacity and your flow allows you to build up the effect. Let me delete that again. Just going to create a new layer for simplicity. And I'm going to pull my flow and my opacity down a bit. and I'm just going to start painting some colour onto this dress. So I am going to tinker about with this. As you can see, that's kind of like a really nice effect. I kind of like that better when there's not so much flow. So I'm going to say Command or Control Z and step back. So I'm going to put a bigger brush on this and just, oh, too much because I'm on a really soft brush. So as you can see, with a very soft brush, one click and that colour has just bled out the side of our subject. And we don't want that. We want a bit more control. Although, of course, if you think about it, you could always come back and paint it out on your mask. So if you put a mask on, hit X for the black brush and come in, you can then tap the colour out. So let's start again, because I've made a real mess of that. And this is how easy this is. You know, you come in and out, it doesn't work, you've not quite got your brush right. There's no need to keep going backwards and forwards over the same thing. Just delete it and start again. So my brush needs to be much smaller. And I am going to start painting over this. And I think I probably need a lower opacity brush, because as you can see, where you keep going over the same area, it actually ends up creating lines. So again, step back. And I want you to play with this, because the only way to get this to work for you is to understand what is going on. Let's just pull that right down. And I'm just going to put a few gentle strokes in here. And I'm just going to come down and try not to go over too much. And I'm not going to worry too much that's bleeding out the edge for now. I'm going to come back and fix this afterwards. So let's go over that as well. And I would like you to just now go away and play around with this on your own and just get this right. You're going to keep coming backwards, choose a different colour. Maybe you're going to decide that you want it. It's easier to come up at 100% opacity to start with. And I'm just going to show you what happens if you do that. Now I've shown you what happens if you do it the other way. So I have painted, because those tools at the top are the opacity and fill for my brush, for what my brush is doing. These adjustments up here, opacity and flow, sorry, are for the brush, what we're actually getting out of the brush. But if we come over here to the layer panel, see what happens if we now use the opacity and fill adjustment on this layer. This is now affecting what we've done. So if we pull the opacity down, we can now actually blend this in. So I'm going to leave the opacity down over on the fill layer, on the layer panel, sorry, and paint on my dress that way. So my brush setting is at 100% opacity and flow, because as you saw, when I started playing with those, it didn't work so well for me, because what was happening was, where I went back over, because I wasn't on 100% opacity to start with, or flow, I was starting to get horrible lines appearing on the dress, and we didn't want that. So it was easier to paint 100% flow and opacity brush settings, because we get a consistent colour then coming out. And then we're going to use our layer over here and play with the opacity and fill on that to blend this in. And then I'm going to tidy up the edges with a mask. So for your homework, open up the image. You need to change that this is black and white at the moment by going image mode and changing it to RGB. And then come in, create yourself a blank layer with your little plus icon, select your colour, your brush, and then play around for yourself with the opacity and flow settings on the brush and see what happens. Choose a colour, it can be any colour you like, paint on your blank layer, and you can see it over here, and then see what happens when you play with the opacity and fill on the layer panel to blend that in. Catch up with me, try and get that right. I'm not going to have you sit here and watch me tinker around with this. I'm going to try and get mine looking a little bit better, and I'll see you in the next lesson when we'll paint on the layer mask to get this blended in, and we'll play around with some blend modes as well. Okay, see you in the next lesson. Have fun playing with that. I'll see you there. Bye for now.